Prologue. A blast went off in a distance, shook the ground and tore through flesh. It appeared as if everything was in motion, and he heard nothing, saw nothing, and he couldn't speak or move. He drifted through a maze of light and darkness. Sometimes he would smile, sometimes a flash of a frown would rest on his youthful, unshaven face. The young girl brought in scissors to trim his light beard on her visits. After a sigh of accomplishment, she sat back and viewed her masterpiece. How handsome he appeared lying there immovable like a Ken doll, she thought. "Lieutenant, can you hear me?" She called out to him, but he didn't answer. And with the Ken doll she adored, she refused to desert the young handsome man lying helpless in front of her. She made time to visit him each morning, holding his hand, reading to him, hoping for a miracle. Noticing he had no visitors, she wondered why. Someone had to miss him. He must be someone's son, husband, or father, she thought. The young man lay in a coma for months. Lying wrapped in clean white sheets, unaware of his surroundings and the world he inhabited, his eyes struggled to open. When he finally broke through a wall, he woke. His blank dark stare focused in the direction of a sound. A woman sat reading and holding his hand. He heard her voice. It was familiar and soothing. Perhaps it was his mother, but her voice and touch was not that of a mother. She could have been, had she not ignited a feeling of sexual pleasure, as she read to him a love poem. He heard the words before, but his mind couldn't grasp the author, or what was said. He struggled once more, questioning and searching for familiarity. "Where am I?" his mind asked. "Who am I? Who belongs to that voice? Why is she here? Why is he here, for that matter?" Fighting to open his eyes, he finally willed his brain to complete a difficult task. But with the help of the girl sitting and holding his hand and her soothing voice, his eyes opened, but through the imaginary light he came to another wall. One filled with darkness. He shut his eyes tight. The girl wasn't holding his hands any longer. He griped the railings on his hospital bed. The reality of it, he was blind. Chapter 1. It was an attraction that could not be described in the usual way. The only way he understood it was that it was white hot. The kind of heat that smolders and appears to be cool, but when you connect with it, it sears your skin, sears your bones, and then envelops your soul. It was like that for Jackson. He felt it when a bomb exploded near his body, and he felt it whenever the young woman came near his bed and touched him. His skin and body reacted to the cool, yet searing heat of her touch. Her touch was that of loving, caring, and kindness that he hadn't experienced for a long time. Every day she visited him and read to him. And because of her, he came back to the land of the living. He couldn't see her face, but he could imagine it, just from her presence and the soft ease of her voice. He was in love with her. He hadn't known this feeling since he first met a girl in high school, whom he had been attracted to from the second he first laid eyes on her and obsessed about. It was an alien feeling for Jackson because he was not the kind of guy who would fall for one girl, and beyond that one obsession, he had never been in love. Why would he? He was young, a football star, and rich. Lying in a hospital bed in the veterans' ward in Houston, where he had spent months in a coma caused by wounds inflicted from a blast, he was lucky because his magnificent body was intact, and this particular hospital specialized in wounded veterans. His mind and vision had suffered from a devastating trauma. Knowing there would be more months of therapy ahead of him, he would have plenty of time to think and piece together the illusion of a teenage girl and the feeling he held in his heart for her. Ever since he came out of the coma, he had searched his memory for her name and her face, but there appeared to be a black hole, only shadows with a blank face and blank eyes. Maybe it was all a delusion, and he had dreamed of this teenager. It had been years since he was in high school. But how many years, he questioned. All this was a bit confusing. His mind contained snippets of what he thought the young girl looked and felt like. It became a game to imagine who she was and why she appeared in his subconscious mind. At first he thought it was just a dream, or perhaps his imagination clinging to some wish for the perfect girl he might fall in love with. Was she real? He wasn't certain because he couldn't remember. He couldn't remember who he was. He had no past. And therefore his future was in jeopardy. Jackson was 18 then, and an arrogant young football jock in his senior year of high school when he first met her. A star quarterback and the richest teen in San Francisco. He had inherited a fortune from his fraternal grandparents, who were in oil, banking, and technology. When they died months of each other, all of their money went to him, their only grandson, against the wishes of his parents. Jackson had said that it was a broken heart that killed his granddad, after his grandmother died of a heart attack in his granddad's arms. His grandparents' will had a stipulation that Jackson would not have access to all the money until he turned 25, but he gained access to some of the money when he turned 18. With that, he purchased a home and cars in his senior year of high school, without telling his mother and father. With his home tucked away in San Mateo County, it became a party house where he and his friends indulged in girls, women, and drinking, often hooking up for sex and downing shots of tequila. All of the student body was privy to the goings-on in the canyon, where an invite secured them a place with the popular girls and boys. After each football game, they would party. And when football season was over, then they would party all the time. Whereas all of Jackson's team members were exhausted after a night of partying, he could consume beer and booze before a game and never have a hangover. While his teammates were sometimes in bed, missing classes and trying to recuperate from the partying, Jackson Van Hughes was strong. The coaches never had to bring in a substitute for him, and even after staying up all night, he was able to win every game that season. He was described as a juggernaut. The Jaguars were the most feared team in high school football in the Bay Area, and it was all because of Jackson. He stood 6'3" with the strongest arms, legs, and the largest hands. He could throw a football to make pros envious. Every throw met Jackson's hands as if it was dropped out of the sky from heaven. He received scholarships from big-name universities when he was only 15, and by the time he was in his senior year of high school, Major League Football scouts knocked at his door, trying to convince him to go pro in his second year of college. The last games of the season, he brought his team to the finals, and he was treated like a celebrity because of his popularity, good looks, and talent. No one messed with Jackson, not teachers, football staff, or administrators. He came and went as he pleased. He was a brilliant student and a brilliant football player. Despite all the abuse his body suffered, he somehow maintained an A average. If he chose, he could go to Stanford, his father's school, or Harvard, which his mother hoped he would choose. Nevertheless, Jackson had one flaw, and that was pure arrogance and an obscene need for female adoration and companionship. He would start a relationship with girls just as casually as he would start a book. Once he found a girl boring, he discarded her after one night of sex. He also had very little loyalty to his friends when it came to their girlfriends. His best friend Dave would brag about his virtuous girlfriend and that she was a virgin, and she would never date or sleep with another guy, especially Jackson. He saw this as a challenge. Jackson called Dave's girl one day and arranged a meeting at his home. After a few kisses, and he knew how to kiss, she had signed the contract agreeing to see a doctor, go through screens of tests before they even had sex. He had girls lined up waiting for him to give the green light, and they would be there when he wanted and where he wanted. He enjoyed sex in his two-seat convertible sports cars. After Jackson showed the paper to Dave, they remained friends, but the girl was dumped by both of them. His requests of girls were that they were of the age where they could have consensual sex. There was too much at stake: his inheritance, his football career, and his partying. He would even take the time to tape them and have them sign an official agreement drawn up by his lawyer before he agreed to date them. He covered his bases with everyone but one. It was the vision of a nameless and faceless girl who kept swirling around his mind. When he first met her, it was a spring day and football season was over. Jackson's team won their championship game. He deserved a rest. He planned a party because it was his final year, and he would be off to college soon. He had to decide whether he wanted to go to Harvard Law School or play football at Stanford. He considered not going to college altogether. Maybe tramp around Europe and see the world. Give up football. He had enough money. Why did he need to go to college? He could spend that time sampling different women, which was a good thought for a young man, but his father had other plans. It's a time when a young boy becomes a man, his father reminded him. You have to make a decision and stop what you are doing. If you don't want to go to college or play major league sports, then take a wife and run your grandfather's company. But Jackson wanted to continue his partying and womanizing, never thinking about the consequences of his actions. His father argued, "A man like you needs a wife to keep him grounded because you think with your dick. You will find all sorts of trouble and the wrong woman. Get a wife," his father shouted. That was the last time Jackson remembered a conversation with his father. He told him that he had his own place and that he was moving out. And it was the next day that he met her. Jackson stood at his locker throwing his books in, his glance shuttled up and down the hallway as his buddy Sidney Grant discussed the pros and cons of stocking the party house with hard liquor. Jackson's eyes wandered further and zoned in on a small figure walking alone. She had mounds of glowing auburn hair that floated down her back and lay in long soft curls on her shoulders. She was dressed in a checkered skirt and white blouse with black leggings tucked in a pair of combat boots, which caused him to swirl around and look twice. She stopped, put in her combination and opened the locker. He had time to scan her from head to toe. Something must be wrong with me, he thought. Why hadn't he seen the fresh new face with the tempting parted lips, all this on an incredible-looking body? Hot was only one of the words to describe the girl. He knew by the way she dressed that she was hiding something. She was shy and didn't want to stand out, but she caught his eyes. He saw past the skirt over her knees, he saw past the white blouse buttoned so tight that appeared to choke her and covered up the fact that she had perky full breasts. He saw past the layered clothing that said, "I'm a virgin and I want to stay that way," and he saw past her combat boots that signaled that she had style. He liked what he saw. His first thoughts were that he had to feel her naked body next to his. He had to kiss her nipples until they rose in his mouth. He had to lie on her and feel his penis enter her. The thought of what he wanted to do to her sent waves of sexual pleasure through his body. Just a brief conversation with a girl, and he could determine whether she was easy or hard. And looking at the way she dressed all covered up, she was hiding something. It piqued his interest and that charmed him. Intent on not letting her get away, he waved Sidney off. "Yeah, do whatever." He gave Sidney a shove in the side, pointing to his next conquest. Leaning against the locker, Jackson ignored Sidney's endless chatter, his eyes focused on the girl who might be all of 16, hopefully 17. He couldn't resist the idea that there was a new, desirable body he hadn't touched or made love to. Distracted and with his hormones raging and playing a serious game of mating, he said, "Yeah, Sidney, you're in charge of the beverage and food, do what you want." Sidney stood watching Jackson's long stride and silent footsteps marching in the direction of the new girl. When Jackson caught up with the girl, he touched her on the shoulder, and he felt a surge of heat. It was that strong and that compelling. The girl didn't seem to notice. She kept walking until his long legs stepped in front of her to stop her, and that's when he saw her soft pouty lips. There was warmth in them, and a natural color of red like a strawberry. "You're in my way and I'll be late for class," the girl said, looking into his warm blue eyes and thinking how handsome and tall. When a smile burst on his face, her pulse raced. "Just tell your teacher that Jackson Van Hughes stopped you to ask a question." "And what is the question that's so important, Mr. Jackson Van Hughes?" the girl asked with a soft coy tone to her voice, wondering why a boy like him would waste his time on a girl like her. But deep inside, she enjoyed the conversation, and she liked the attention. "Your name." "What's your name?" he asked, looking down with his hands above her head, with his palms placed on the wall above her, as if he could hold up the building with his muscular arms. "That's the question?" she queried, smiling and taking in his jacket with his name and the colors of the high school. She gave a nervous glance at his face with his strong jaw and perfect white teeth. "Well?" He put his arms out to the side, waiting for an answer. "My name is Summer." And Summer walked around Jackson with his eyes scanning her movements, and she turned to the left and headed for her class. "You're going to be mine someday," he shouted as she turned the corner. Summer, affected by his last words ringing down the hallway, put her head down, placing her hands over her mouth, and smiled. She had never had a feeling like this before. And Jackson couldn't believe that he would say something as lame as that to a girl. He was too cool to make that kind of mistake. Summer felt a jolt ring through her body when he said those words. It was inconceivable that a handsome guy, a football jock by the look of his jacket, would be interested in her. She didn't care much for jocks, and had less tolerance for them because they were full of themselves, she thought. Some of them never read a book if it wasn't a comic book, or saw a play, or spent time at the movies unless it was something like Dumb and Dumber. What could they discuss then, if she even did entertain a notion to talk to him? Yet she couldn't forget his smile. It spread heat through her, causing her to feel excited. She had never felt like that before. Summer knew what he wanted though, and it just wasn't going to happen. She had to graduate high school and go to college. She had no time to date, and besides, she was only 17 and couldn't date a senior boy until she made 18, which was a week away. By that time, she would probably be gone from that school before her graduation. So she put aside any notion of having a long-term relationship with any boy, let alone this arrogant hot football star. He probably had so many girls at his beck and call that it would be a waste of her time even thinking of him, but think of him she did. "You are late, Summer Winter," her English teacher stated in her usual strict manner. On hearing her name, some of the students looked up and few of them snickered. Who names their only child Summer Winter, she asked herself, lowering her head and proceeding to her seat at the back of the class. She thought of dropping Jackson's name just to stop the girls from laughing at her. However, it was not her style to name drop, and she didn't even want anyone to know that he spoke to her, because she would bet he had quite the reputation. Although she knew nothing of him, she could guess from his arrogant, secretive smile that he felt he ruled the world, and nothing could stop him from getting what he wanted, not even her. Now every day, she would have to slink to her seat with kids snickering about her name. "Okay, the show is over. Get back to those papers," the teacher said with a slight glance over her glasses. "I wouldn't laugh at Summer if I were you. She's the only one who managed to get an A on her term paper, and I don't give out A's easily," the teacher said with a wicked smile crossing her face and with her sharp nose turned upward. Now I have something else to worry about, Summer thought. Students calling me a geek. She had completed the paper and pretended that she was editing it before she turned it in, but her thoughts had drifted back to the tall football jock. I have lost my sense of perspective. Why am I thinking of him, she wondered. She turned to gaze out of the window, daydreaming. His gorgeous body lingered in her mind, the memory of his blue eyes and dark blonde hair striking her like a bolt of lightning. Never had a boy like him been interested in her before, which made him more suspect. What did he want with her? Suppose he showed up again, what would she do? Summer thought he was so handsome, but he was also too confident. She saw the way girls gazed at her when he strode to her locker. Her thoughts of him trailed away because he was just too dangerous. He could take away all her dreams in one night if she allowed him. Yet she also knew he could make one of her dreams come true. But she would not be around long enough for him to even take interest in her. So that did it, no more of what's his name. Jackson. Jackson, she murmured. It had a nice ring to it. It was a strong name. In the mist of her daydreaming, someone tapped her on her shoulder. It was her new and only friend Tiffany. "I saw you with Jackson," Tiffany whispered, intermittently looking up to see if the teacher had noticed her talking to Summer. "I've never known him to be interested in brunettes." "He just asked my name," Summer whispered. "If he asked your name, you can be sure that he will ask you out." "I think you are blowing something innocent out of proportion," Summer said, glancing at Tiffany. "There is nothing innocent about Jackson." Tiffany raised her eyebrows. Summer smiled, and a feeling of euphoria took over her body. The bell rang and she sent the paper to the teacher's email, then rushed for the door with Tiffany beside her. Tiffany stopped outside of the classroom. "Summer, he has a reputation. I bet he has scored with all the pretty, rich, blonde, and interested junior and senior girls," Tiffany said. "Does he have a girlfriend?" Summer questioned. "No. I think they are his hookup girls." "His what?" "You know, the ones who are willing to be with him and his friends just so they can brag, and the ones who just want to say they slept with his gorgeous ass for a night." "Well, I don't want to do either," Summer stated, shoving her books into her locker and looking around. "It's not what you want, I hear. It's what he wants, and he always gets what he wants, and right now he has his radar on you. He can sense a virgin a mile away like a homing pigeon knows where his home is," Tiffany said, laughing as she opened her locker door, dropped in her books and headed with Summer for the lunchroom. "You know we will have to pass the senior lockers, and that is a gauntlet. Are you prepared to walk the gauntlet now that he has singled you out as his next victim?" "Is there another way we can get to the lunchroom?" Summer asked, feeling a bit weak-legged. "We can go through those doors," Tiffany said, pointing to the blue and silver double doors. "Then we can walk around through the courtyard and come in on the side doors, get our lunch and sit outside away from the crowds." "That sounds great," Summer said, smiling, not wanting to run from Jackson but hoping he would look for her. "But I want to warn you, he has spies everywhere." "What do you mean, spies?" "This sounds like a James Bond movie," Summer said, looking at Tiffany and laughing. "You may laugh, but Jackson always gets his girl, and similarly, James Bond always gets his man." "This is ridiculous. Let's get a sandwich and sit outside." The girls bought their lunch, and as they headed out of the cafeteria, they saw Jackson standing in the parking lot filled with expensive cars. He was surrounded by a bevy of beautiful, rich girls. There were blondes, brunettes, redheads, and even some other colors of the rainbow. He immediately spotted Summer, and the sea of girls opened, so he sauntered through, stretching his long legs in Summer's direction. "I'm leaving," Tiffany said abruptly. "Don't leave me, Tiffany." Summer raised her hand to hold on to Tiffany's shirt, but Tiffany wrangled out of the hold and scampered across the lawn, like a thoroughbred racehorse, leaving Summer to deal with the devastatingly handsome, incorrigible Jackson Van Hughes. Standing near an oak tree and trying to decide whether she should hide behind it, she watched him make her way to her side before she could move. "You look like you were going somewhere," he said, now standing with legs crossed and gazing down on Summer, he said. "I hope it wasn't on my account," he said, standing with legs crossed and gazing down on Summer. "No. I have to study for my test tomorrow." "Don't you study?" "Never." He moved closer, his muscular body and his smoldering eyes circling her like a cage, preventing her from running. "Well, some people are not that smart," she stammered. "You appear to be very smart," he said, facing Summer and planting his hand over her head on the tree trunk. "I would say you aren't an average student." "I'm smart enough to know what you want," Summer said with a hidden smile. Their eyes locked. Jackson had never had a girl speak her mind before. It was an unwritten law that if he was interested enough to talk to them, they would sleep with him without any unnecessary protest. Maybe she didn't get the memo, or she wasn't on Twitter or Facebook, which could be good or bad for him. Good if she was innocent and unaware of his prowess as a womanizing jock, but bad if he had to spend too much time with her trying to break her will. Jackson's eyes lowered on Summer's face, and when he raised one eyebrow, all her defenses crumbled. He reached for her small oval face and held it in his large hands. She felt the warmth of his hands. It was not the kind of touch one feels from a guy who was cold, uncaring, aloof, but rather the touch of a guy who had a heart. Was warm, caring, needing. There was more going on with him, Summer thought. But she had never had experiences with guys like him before, and she didn't want to misread a handsome face. She had heard about this amorous jock long before Tiffany had whispered his name, but she never took it serious. Besides, she never thought that he would talk to her. How could one guy have so much in one package? That is why he had no competition from anyone his age on the West Coast, maybe not in the world. Summer fell into the spring of Jackson. She fell into his kiss when he planted one on her lips. She leaned into the seduction and heat of his kiss. His tongue released desire of the most erotic kind. Their bodies touched lightly, and she felt the pulse of his manhood. They were caught up in the white heat which surrounded their kiss, and nothing else mattered at that time. Time stood still, and the earth revolved around them. Summer moved into him, her fantasies and passions cocooned in his warm arms and seductive body. His tongue mingled with hers. The earth moved where she could feel it, or was it her that almost fainted from his embrace? A sound jarred Jackson's senses. His name was being chanted. Jackson, Jackson, and finally the zone that he was in at that moment with Summer was gone. He broke away from her lips, breathless, and said, "I'm having a party this weekend. Please be there." And he trotted away. Before he reached his friends, he turned and yelled, "Ask Tiffany about the party, she knows where it is." Summer stood mesmerized at the thought of seeing Jackson again. She was flattered at the thought of him inviting her, a new student, into his circle and to a senior party. But it was impossible to get away and go there. When he invited her, it was a dare. He dared her to hang out and hook up with him. He dared her to resist his kiss and his charms. She wouldn't take his dare. Nothing good could come from it, she rationalized. Her next class was technology, and Tiffany sat near her. "Thanks," Summer said. They were sitting close enough in the back of the class that they could talk without the teacher walking around peeping at them. "You left me," Summer said, disappointed. "Aren't you glad I did?" Tiffany whispered, excited. He never kissed a girl in front of his teammates, let alone any other girls. "You're special. Everyone is saying it. They have never seen Jackson act like that." "Tiffany, Jackson invited me to his house for a party," Summer said with reservation. "Don't get too excited because he does that with all the girls he is planning on, you know." Tiffany gestured. "You just said that I was special." Summermouth turned down, confused. "Yes, you are, as long as you don't give it up," Tiffany said. "Well, I hope he knows that it will never happen, because I will not let him get in my pants. My parents will never let me go anyway. All of the girls he targets go to his house with the same idea. I'm a virgin and I'm staying that way. But the next day there they are running behind him, hoping he calls or texts, which he never does. He said to ask you about his party. Did you?" Summer queried, praying that Tiffany hadn't slept with him. "No. I'm not his type, if you know what I mean. But one year I went to his party with my older sister. She's a senior now. She was dating the quarterback, who was then a friend of Jackson. He was a senior when Jackson was a junior. Jackson bought a house that year. He's rich, you know. He has more money than his parents." Summer sat up, eyes opened wide, unable to believe Tiffany's words. "Rich. I know I don't want to have anything to do with him," Summer said, shaking her head. "Well, since you have such control, why don't you come with me to the party?" Tiffany's eyes locked on Summer. "How can you go? Will your parents let you go to a party like that?" Summer whispered with her eyes focused on Tiffany in disbelief. I can go with my big sister. She's a senior and they are graduating in May. They'll celebrate until graduation. They'll party until they go off to college, especially that handsome hunk Jackson. Just tell your parents that you want to go to a sleepover at my house. Nothing will happen to you, my sister will be there, and she is friends with everyone, Tiffany said, trying to make her case. You will never get a chance like this again, maybe never in a lifetime. I'll let you know, Summer said with a distracted glance. Saturday is the party, you have less than a week to decide. Tiffany distracted her, and her gaze wandered to Tiffany. Saturday is my birthday. I'll be 18, Summer confessed. What better way to celebrate? Please say you'll go, Summer. I can't promise anything. My father's job is transferring, and I have to help my mother pack. But it's your birthday. Your parents would want you to be happy, and you're a good girl. You're on the honor roll, you make A's, and you have never been out on a date or had a drink, and you will be 18. You're almost grown. Tiffany gave Summer a litany of excuses for her to mull over. Something is bound to work, just try it. I've never lied to my parents, she said honestly. Isn't everything I said the truth? Tiffany said with a satisfied smirk. Well, yes. Then what's the problem?